Okay, Lyndell, that was really great to hear about all the work that you're doing. Now, when you were speaking, you were really talking about working amongst the Muslims, trying to reach out to the Muslims. We're right here in Israel now. Is there any openness amongst the Jewish people to Christianity? And how would you compare that to the openness of Muslims to Christianity?
Well, I think there is right now they say there are about 15,000 Messianic Jews here in Israel. And there are about 120 different Messianic congregations. Some of them are small, some of them do meet in larger churches that are meeting here in the country. I personally meet with a young a young Messianic pastor about once every 2 weeks. He asked me to teach him, start teaching him a preaching class, have a preaching class for him, because I had taught preaching in our Bible college and also in the Bethlehem Bible College. And he asked me if I would help him and so we sit together. It's become more of a mentoring thing. And it's really thrilling to see his openness. Of course, he is involved in reconciliation also. So he's not, anti-Arab or anything. So we have a great relationship. But I do think that there is an openness. I do think that it's going to take those Messianic Jewish leaders to actually reach the Jewish people rather than foreigners from outside. I think back 20 years ago it was different. I think back even 10 years ago, a lot of missionaries could come in from outside, and that's how the Messianic movement got started, from people coming and being witnesses, and I still think there's that important element of living out your faith in front of your neighbors. But in fact, we live in a Jewish neighborhood. But I think living it out and making them jealous or making them curious as to what makes us tick. We have Orthodox Jewish neighbors here that we've got to be real close to. And the one across the hall is completely baffled. He cannot understand who and what we are. But we have a great relationship. He just, because I've been helpful to him, I've tried to, he's has some serious handicaps that are very difficult for him to walk, and on Shabbat he won't call a taxi or won't use his telephone. So he, a couple of Shabbats ago, asked me if I would call a taxi for him to go to an emergency room. And I told him, I said, I will take you. I don't want to call a taxi, I'll take you. And he couldn't believe I would do that. And then he told me that night that he had called his family in Panama and told them that this priest, he calls me a priest, this priest would take me to the emergency room. And then I went out and bought him some juice because he had pneumonia, and the doctors told him he needed to drink a lot of orange juice. And so I went out and bought him some. And he just couldn't believe that we would be. And then he's asking us, why would you do this? And so I'll have a chance someday. I'm not going to rush him with the 4 spiritual laws or anything, but I think someday he's going to ask me what makes me tick. And then my wife has a great relationship with an elderly lady who is one of our neighbors. And she asked my wife to take her to the Garden Tomb one year, and Kay was able to share her testimony about our faith in the resurrection of Jesus. And so we just have a great relationship with them. And I think that's the way we're going to still reach them, is by showing them love and caring for them and really deeply loving them. But there is an openness. As I said, there are about 15,000. I think that the Arab community also can be useful in leading some of the Jews to Christ, especially in the Galilee. All of our pastors there are fluent in Hebrew also. In fact, Hebrew, you heard them speak English, and their English is excellent. But actually, Hebrew is their second language. So English would be their third language. And they also have a spirit of reconciliation. And Nazar, one of our pastors, you met Nazar in Nazareth. He's involved in reconciliation. He spoke at a reconciliation conference. They asked him to close the conference. They had done everything together. They had worshiped. They had, they'd been singing together. They prayed together. They had done communion and everything. They asked him to close it. He didn't know what to do. He said, Lord, what am I supposed to do? And he said the Lord really instructed him to go into the kitchen and get a basin of water and come out and wash the feet of the Messianic pastors. And it was quite a breakthrough. And then they insisted on washing his feet and serving him. And I think that was a real turning point in some of the Messianic Jewish leaders. But there are a few. It's not all of them, but there are a few that are trying to work with Messianic Jews also and being witnesses to their neighbors. So I think but there is an openness, and I think that they are coming to Christ. Like I said, I think about 120 Messianic congregations are meeting now in Israel.
Okay, I have another question. When I first went to England, well, I went to Wales and to England, and I look back and trying to learn the new culture, and I found that hard, and everyone there spoke English.
And the new language. The new English.
Yeah. Now you came to the Middle East, and you eventually started traveling to many different of the countries in the Middle East. When you look back, was it hard? Was it difficult to do that? I mean, now you're experienced, you know what you're doing. Compare today when you're coming towards retirement, and you've already said that a lot of people, the indigenous leaders and national leaders, will be taking over. But compare now to 33 years ago when you started.
I think that our longevity has really probably, a lot of times missiologists will say that someone should go on stage just a few years and then move on. Plant a church, teach indigenous leaders to take over, and then move on. But I think our longevity has really paid off because it took us a long time, and it does take a long time to build up trust. I do think that that's one thing that the people would say that they trust me. And it's just because of the relationship that we've had, and I've proven myself, I think, trustworthy to them. So I think probably the hardest thing was in the beginning, probably the first 10 years, maybe 15 years, was just feeling like I had to get them to trust me, and they wouldn't just take me at my word, that I had to prove myself so that they would trust me. And I think that was one thing. I think that they value things differently than we do. Here, there are a couple things that are wonderful that they value. One is hospitality. And coming in, and we had to. Our home has always been open, but it was in a nuisance when we lived in Nazareth. I mean, it was like someone told us our house was like Sukatalata, which means the Tuesday morning market, because people were running in and out of especially on Saturdays when the youth were out of school, and we had youth meetings, and so our house was open. But hospitality is something that's very highly valued. We had to get used to that a little bit more than we were even used to. Other things that are valued highly for them that we've tried to, in our own lives, to teach them that this is not so important is the authority issue. I remember ordaining or at least appointing a few pastors a few years ago, and they said to me, the most important thing you can do for us is to tell our church what kind of authority we have. And and that shocked me. I thought, basically the Bible is your authority. The power of the Lord is your authority. But I said, no. They said, no. You have to tell them what kind of authority we have. So that was something I had to get used to, was the value of leadership. It's changing. I think now there is much more of a servant leadership among, and not just in our church, but I think among the Arab pastors, they are learning that service is more important than just dictatorial. And I think what we're seeing in the Middle East, where we're seeing these regimes fall now, almost all of them. And I don't think Jordan will be like that, because Jordan's King Hussein, and now King Abdullah, have not acted as dictators. They've been very good for their people, and people have loved them. But in the other countries where the dictators have just ruled and gotten rid of those who don't follow them, but I've seen that kind of mentality in the church. Not that they would kill, but that they would actually let good leaders go if they were a threat to them. And that's changing completely now. I think that they're trying to accept other leaders and mentor other leaders, and it's. But that was one thing I think that I had to get used to, was that power and authority was so highly valued to them. Mercy and grace were not. And time and time again, people used to say to me, "You're too weak. You're a weak leader," because I was too merciful, and I had to get used to that. And I had to a few times to kind of not crack some heads, but I had to kind of lay the law down and be a little bit more firm than I'm used to in my own culture. But and I think hopefully they've been able to learn that grace and mercy are very highly valued by the Lord. So, but it was something in the Arab culture. But it wasn't, I can't blame them, it's their Arab culture. And you see that with the dictators that have been, and even like what's going on in Syria today, those who have been against the regime are the ones that are being severely punished and losing their lives. So those are some things that I think that I had to get used to, was their values, their things that they valued. Some of the things were really good, and some of the things I didn't feel like were biblical, and so we've tried to work on those things together. And in my own culture, there are some things that are certainly not biblical, and so I've had to. And I think from being outside of my own culture, it's helped me to be able to see that.
Just perhaps one last question. I'm sure many of our viewing audience would have lots of questions to ask you. But I mean, you'll be going back to America in a couple of years' time when you retire. You'll have a year's deputation work. The Middle East is a very complicated and complex situation. You've been here 33 years and understand it as well as most. How can you somehow translate your understanding of the Middle East and the peoples to an American culture that is so far removed in many ways from that?
Yeah. Well, I think that Arabs there's a stereotype in America of Arabs, most of them being Muslim, most of them being terrorists, most of them being, and we try to present to the people that, okay, the major majority of Arabs are Muslim, but there's a very, very small minority from even the Muslims who are violent and who are like what the media builds up and what people fear. I think I would. One of the themes that I've really tried to preach in probably the last 10 years more than ever, that all men are redeemable, and we have to believe. And I have to remind them that Saul was on his way to Damascus to kill and to imprison, and I have to remember Ananias' response to God. I kind of identify with Ananias, where you think, what, you want me to go to someone that's a major terrorist, or you want me to mix with this group that has a reputation? And the Lord, the Lord's going to call out some of them, major, and I think He already is. And I think we just teach people not to fear anyone because of their race or their color or their religion. I think it would also, for us to keep in our minds or in our hearts, that all men are redeemable and that God doesn't want any of them to perish. And He created them, and we need to do all we can to bring them to the Lord. And I would say that in America, get to know your neighbors. Don't fear them. Get to know them. Get into their homes. Let them get into your homes. And you'll find some wonderful, wonderful people that are not like you necessarily, and not like even from your religion, but you'll be able to share Christ with them in some ways when they see your love and your kindness, and they'll certainly see a difference. But I would just say to people, don't fear the people from the Middle East. Love them and care for them and get to know them. They're really wonderful people. And that's happened whenever we've had a work and witness team, we've ever had any groups that have come over. Every one of them, everyone without any exception, have said that this coming has changed their whole attitude toward the people of the Middle East. And they have often said, when we had a vision tour, they went and saw all of the holy sites. They went to Bethlehem, they went to the Garden of Gethsemane, they went to the Galilee, they went to Nazareth, and they went to Jordan, to Petra, and they saw everything here in the Middle East that most tourists see. But we would have days of prayer and meeting together with our pastors, and they always said that the highlight of the trip was the days we met with the pastors and prayed with them and talked to them. So I would just say, get to know the people from the Middle East, and you'll love them, and don't be afraid of them. And because they are as afraid of you as you are of them. So don't fear, love, and care for them. That's what I'm going to say.
Right. Thanks, Lyndell. And perhaps we could invite you to the Church of the Nazarene in Kings Lynn, Norfolk, England, if you're visiting.
I would love to come.
Your family and friends, just jump across the channel. And on deputation, if you can come to England, you're more than welcome to come. We'd be pleased to have you there.
Okay. Maybe we could do that on our last week. Our few weeks on our way to the States. Maybe we could do a tour, because I have many friends in England. Scotland and Ireland now, so we could maybe do some deputation.
Okay. Thank you, Lyndell, for giving us your time and letting us into your home.
Wonderful.
And God bless you and Kay and the family.
Thank you. And thank you for your prayers.